Today on Words and Numbers, sports gambling,
false scarcity,
YouTube TV,
and the fracturing of political parties.
All this and more coming up on Words and Numbers, a Civil original production. Check us out at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Anthony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Yep, it's new and exciting in your world this week.
Something's happened since we've gone to 2 episodes. We're getting so much listener email that's pretty much all I do now is read listener email.
It's hard to keep. It's hard to keep up.
This latest is from one of our listeners, Muhammad Ali. He says, I've been watching you fastidiously since your very first Learn Liberty video on government debt. And I have to say something here. That if you haven't seen that video, check it out. It's got to be 10 years old plus now. It's on the government debt, and it's all of 30 seconds long. What had happened is I'd gone down to where we were doing the Learn Liberty videos and spent all day recording a whole bunch of these videos, all of which they released, and we're all done getting ready to wrap up. And I said, hey, let's try something. And I threw up a slide of the government debt compared to other things and said, I'm gonna walk across and talk about this. Just follow me with the camera. And they did, and it was like a 30-second video. And that one video, I think, got more views than all of my other 100 videos combined.
It turned into a chapter in our book.
That's right. Yeah, I did.
Remember, and I remember when we were trying to figure out how to explain the debt in our book, and it was a cute amount back then, only in the 20 trillions. I don't remember which of the 20s it was, but not like 38 trillion like we have now. And we were trying to figure out how many drops of water were in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, which, come to find out, is a rather difficult thing to figure out. And the line you kept using was, we need an analogy to explain the analogy to explain the debt.
Right.
So we're probably four stages into it now, right? An analogy to explain the analogy to explain the analogy to explain the analogy.
But looking back on it, that was probably the most productive 30 seconds of my life. It was just off the cuff, let's do this. But nonetheless,
I have a lot of jokes to make right now, and I'm just going to let them pass. I'm going to let them pass because everybody knows exactly what they are. Anthony has 6 children. That's 5 seconds each, et cetera, et cetera.
Our listener, Muhammad Ali, says, I was thinking about the concept of false scarcity that posits that government could create a shortage of sand in the Sahara and applying it to water crises manifesting in California and Saudi Arabia due to government pushes for agriculture. There is no reason that Saudi Arabia needs to grow its own wheat when it can import cheaply from neighbors. Saudi monarchs and politicians decided it was necessary for Saudi Arabia to control its own food supply. This sounds just like American politicians on about how it's necessary for us to be independent and have our own oil supply and all of that. He goes on, by the way, and says, thank you for talking about Canada. 2 episodes a week have been even better, and the quality has improved more. He's talking about me, not you. I seriously don't know how he did say you too. That must have been a typo. I seriously don't know how you are so consistent and so good, Muhammad. Now, I have some thoughts on this. I think he's right to point to the politicians. The Saudi politicians are obsessed with being self-sufficient in water like American politicians are obsessed with being self-sufficient in oil. And this sounds good initially, but if you dig into it, I think that position ultimately arises from and engenders a lack of trust. I mean, it arises from a lack of trust.
Of course it does.
Yeah, because what's going to happen if the Saudis stop selling me oil, and the Saudis, what happens if the Americans stop selling me wheat?
This is exactly the perspective behind anti-globalism.
Right. So you can see how this arises from a lack of trust, but it also engenders a lack of trust. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if I become self-sufficient in oil, Now I don't need the Saudis, and the Saudis know that, which means the Saudis are thinking, well, the Americans might cut off my supply of wheat, and vice versa. And we see this repeatedly when you look at trade numbers. Countries that trade more are more peaceful toward each other. They can't afford to go to war.
Not only that, Ant, they're more peaceful generally.
They're more, yes, that's an interesting thing. If you look at the data, they're not just more peaceful with regard to, military things in other countries, but they're more peaceful in regard to how they treat their own citizens.
That's right. They're more peaceful externally to their trading partners, but also to everybody else.
Yeah.
And then they're more decent to their own people, which is, you would think, the prescription for some sort of heavenly existence here on earth. But yet, wait a second, the politicians will say we can't have that.
Right.
And there's this innate fear that whatever you need that you get from somebody else, it will eventually dry up, or they'll withhold it, this sort of thing. And these are rational fears because people do behave that way. And this drives a certain kind of politics everywhere that becomes more destructive everywhere over time. I don't know that there's a way around this. I really don't. And think of it this way. If you individually, Anthony Davies, could be perfectly self-sufficient, you would be, right? If you could do it without a tremendous cost to yourself, of course you would.
Yeah, that footnote is the important part. If I could do it without a tremendous cost, right?
Without a tremendous cost, but you would incur some cost to be perfectly self-sufficient. Any rational person would. Okay, step back, look at a nation. How's a nation going to behave? Precisely that way. The beauty of it is that resources are scattered across the globe.
Right, yes.
That's the beauty of it. You can't be self-sufficient. Even if you could be, it would cost so much that it wouldn't be worth it. So you have to find a way to get along. Now, you know the old saying, we could go easy or we could go hard. I'd rather go easy. And if I were in a position of authority, that's precisely what I would do. But
and I think
we find other people who like to drive a hard bargain, right? They want to win somehow.
The thing that people miss when they talk about self-sufficiency is the tremendous power of specialization. You talked about it in our Words and Numbers Live last time, that whatever it was, I forget Adam Smith's numbers, but one person could make so many pins an hour, and if you specialized and broke it down to steps, you could produce tens or hundreds of thousands more pins using the same labor.
That's right.
Yeah, and that happens as well. At the country level, you specialize in doing what you do better and trade with other people. But this is a very long-winded way of getting to Muhammad's core question, which is about groundwater or fresh water. And I don't know, I know enough to know that the question is very complicated. And so there's not a lot I can say about it. I'm thinking about California or your situation in Arizona, but I can speak in broad strokes. And in broad strokes, I would say, look, if you have a problem, like he points out with Saudi Arabia or California, depletion of groundwater, you ask, why do we have a depletion of groundwater? My knee-jerk answer is because you don't have a market price attached to it. If you had a market price attached to it, the price would go up and the depletion would attenuate. Why don't you have a market price? Well, because property rights either aren't established or they're established in name only, they aren't enforced. And when I did a little digging into California, and I said, what's the deal with property rights and water in California? I get this thing that says, oh no, property rights, water is a public resource. Yeah, that sounds really good, but what it means is nobody owns the thing, and so everybody has an incentive to use it. Nobody has an incentive to preserve it.
That's right. And look, here in Arizona, we get like 1.5 inches of rain a year where I live. Back when I lived in New England and in western Pennsylvania, water fell free from the sky.
Right.
There's no shortage. And I think, don't hold me to this, but I'm almost positive that I pay less for water here than I did in Pennsylvania
Really?
because it's controlled by politicians. Now, what's going to happen when living in the desert has no associated cost for something that your life depends on? And what's going to happen is lots of people are going to move here and further deplete the resource. You talk about market price. Market price goes much deeper than paying by the gallon. It goes as deep as choosing where you'll live.
Yeah. And
now California has an obvious answer. They can desalinize ocean water, and the Saudis can do that too. And that's going to happen, right? It already happens in limited respects, but sooner or later, that's going to be the right answer. It's going to be cheap enough just to do.
Yeah, and you say sooner or later, and I would argue it would have been a lot sooner if they had actual property rights and market prices, because what would have happened is the price of water would have skyrocketed, and all of a sudden there would have been a tremendous profit incentive in investing in R&D for desalination. And that's why, people ask why it's taken Americans so long to start adopting electric vehicles. Well, part of it was because petroleum was subsidized to a greater or lesser degree in this country. Oil is relatively cheap, and so there wasn't the incentive. There wasn't a profit incentive to invest in what was necessary to make electric vehicles a thing.
Last thing in the world I want to do is pay twice as much for a car that I have to. But if I turned on the spigot in my kitchen, knowing that the water that was coming out cost $10 a gallon, I would be very judicious in my use of water. Because it costs pennies, I have a swimming pool.
Yeah, in Arizona. Yeah.
In the desert. And I had to replace the water in the pool last year, and I found out that everybody gets a free refill.
You're kidding. Wow.
I didn't have to pay for the water.
Wow.
There you go.
We're happy to announce that Civil members can join me and James for a new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live. Words and Numbers Live is a members-only series in which James and I talk about issues in politics, philosophy, and economics. We take a deeper dive and then invite listeners for a live Q&A session. In this week's session, which is available now, we examine human flourishing. To participate in this exclusive series, subscribe to Civil at civil.com. That's CIVL.com. When you log into civil.com, you'll find an archive of our past lecture series, as well as the collection of all our episodes of Words and Numbers and announcements about upcoming lectures in our new Words and Numbers Live series. Subscribe to Civil for $5 a month or $50 for an annual subscription.
Switching gears a little bit, I mean, this is all about a lot of unintended consequences, and I have a massive unintended consequence to talk about today. And I know your eyes are just going to dull right over with the next two things I talk about, but I want to start. We are going to talk about sports. Yes, we are.
Oh, God,
and
I hate it.
Shut up. God, try to pretend to be a man for a minute. I mean, it's just for a minute. The UFC, do you even know what the UFC is? It's mixed martial arts. People get in an octagonal cage and beat the ever-loving hell out of each other until one of them can't continue.
Yes.
And needless to say, I think this is one of the greatest things in the world. I love watching two grown men, or even, and sometimes better, two grown women beating the hell out of each other. This is entertainment at its finest. But a bunch of years ago, I was standing in a classroom, and I said, someday, sports wagering is going to be legal in the United States, and all hell is going to break loose when that happens. And don't get me wrong, I think sports betting should be legal. It's my money. I'm watching sports. I do what I want. But the UFC has cut a fighter named Isaac Dolgarian after his first fight. You have to be very good to get to the UFC. That's like the major leagues of mixed martial arts. And there were betting irregularities. around his fight, which he lost. And he was a prohibitive favorite.
Yeah.
A lot of smart money came in against him. What did they know that the other people didn't? The fight was fixed. There's a long history of fight fixing in the United States, right? All the way back to the 1910s and even before in boxing. And it's now crept up here. It used to be the mob that fixed fights. So they would know to bet a heavy underdog because they knew he would win. Well, in the wake of this, a raft of UFC fighters came out and said, I've been approached to throw a fight. We got a problem here. And it's not just here. When you watch an NFL game and a referee blows an obvious call, was it an honest mistake or is the fix in? There was an NBA referee who was fixing games. We all know it. He was caught. And you start to think about the incentives that referees face. They're not making money like athletes, but they could.
Right.
We've got an NBA problem right now where a player's been suspended, and it's usually not fixing games. It's usually point shaving. So you either cover or don't cover a spread, something like this. And there's a player who's out. There's a Hall of Fame coach who's in a world of trouble. And you're going to see this over and over and over in every sport that has betting. And I have no idea where it's going to land. But this is just the tip of a gigantic iceberg.
Now, it makes me think about there are economists, I want to say Don Boudreaux, but don't quote me on that, who have argued that insider trading in stocks should not be illegal.
I agree.
And
It should
the
be
argument,
public. It should be
yes,
public.
that's yes. And it touches on what you're talking about. Okay, there's people behind the scenes. Don't outlaw the betting. Just increase the information. Let everybody know who's betting how much on whom.
Yep. Show every single thing. Right down to the individual bets. Let me see who's betting. And make shell betting illegal. Right? So I can't get you to place a bet for me on something I know about. Which is, what the insider trading almost always is too. Right? It's usually
but that sort of thing.
Dare I say it, Nancy Pelosi. For everybody who thinks I only pick on Republicans, Nancy Pelosi has a remarkable stock trading record. It's remarkable.
Yeah. Well,
so much so that I know there's something dirty in it.
It was something about the Clintons way back. Maybe was it Hillary that she turned like make a multi-$100,000 profit in a matter of days on some stock trade or something. But now
and we all shrug our shoulders. Right?
It sounds counterintuitive, this business about, you should allow insider trading. But the important thing is the information. If everybody knows, what's going to happen if, for example, suppose it's legal for a CEO who has insider information to trade on his own stock, what we're going to be doing is watching that CEO all the time. And as soon as he moves, as soon as he buys or sells a stock, we're going to mimic it, knowing that he knows something that we don't. And the information then gets incorporated into the price much more quickly.
What you just said is key. We have to see it in real time because there are reporting requirements, right, for CEOs and officers and what have you. But you get the information way too late to capitalize on it yourself.
Right.
You get it a quarter too late, and that's no good. And honestly, there's no excuse for it in the information age. We can know right now who's doing what all the time. And I see no problem with that. None whatsoever. Anyway, this brings us to the foolishness of the week that is somehow related, not exactly. I am so cheesed right now at YouTube TV that I can barely contain my anger.
Tell us how you really feel, James.
Oh, the words I want to say now would melt our podcast. Everybody's little ears would just close right up. Yours first. YouTube TV. a company that I send nearly $100 to every month so I can watch TV, has a beef with Disney. And I don't like Disney either. They also can go make sweet, sweet love to themselves. And they decided together that they were going to have such a beef that the Disney channels all disappeared from the package that I pay $100 a month to see. Now, you would think me rambling on in anger about Disney would be a bit of a non sequitur, and you'd be right until you realize that today is Tuesday and ESPN is part of the Disney package and Monday Night Football was yesterday.
Oh my God.
And YouTube TV on their idiotic X stream says if this is a protracted problem, we will credit you for $20 a month. It's a protracted problem already. Every Monday this goes on is the very definition of a protracted problem. The hell? You can't get, and the NFL, they can kiss my posterior as well. Because the NFL could have said, all you jackwagons, get in the same room, lock the door, and don't come out until you fix this. And nobody did that. Now, you know full well that in this life, I don't ask for much. I really don't. But on Monday nights, I want to sit down outside, smoke a cigar, drink a soda, and watch Monday Night Football. And 3 groups of assholes have made that completely impossible.
All right, so let's back up a minute. Am I correct? You can just get a subscription to Disney Channel?
I'm not paying another $20 a month to watch a game that I should get with the $100 a month I already pay.
But if YouTube is crediting you $20 a month,
and they're not, they say
washes out.
They will at some magical time in the future.
What else, just out of curiosity,
all of them.
What else do you get for your $100 YouTube subscription?
All the cable channels and all my local channels.
Okay.
It's functionally cable TV.
Yeah, I don't know.
I hope YouTube goes out of business. My heart is filled with hatred for these people.
I got a YouTube subscription maybe 4 years ago, and it wasn't what you're talking about. It was like, if I remember correctly, it's like $100 for the year. It's their is it YouTube Plus? It's whatever it is.
They take out the ads.
Yes, it's whatever it is, takes the ads out, because going back to the birth of YouTube, I had browsers that stripped ads out. And I'd lived with them for so long, I didn't realize there were ads in YouTube until my browser about 4 years ago stopped working.
If I may. And another thing. I pay YouTube TV $100 a month, and I still get ads on YouTube.
Oh, that's not right.
And kiss my ass. I told them they were going to be the foolishness of the week on Twitter last night, and here it is. And they're going to be the foolishness of the week next week, too, if I can't see Monday Night Football. I ask for nothing in this world, and I somehow manage to get even less week after week after week. Anyway, let's move on. Now that I'm all worked up, we might as well go talk about something else that's really pissing me off. Because this past week, Tucker Carlson, who, what's that word I'm looking for, Ant? Who is an idiot. Tucker Carlson's a moron. I don't know how else to put it. He's in the pocket of Vladimir Putin. He says stupid things on a regular basis, and yet, maybe yet isn't the right word. Maybe the right word is so a bunch of morons take him seriously. And what did he do last week? He had this little twerp, whose name is now escaping me. I'm so angry. Fuentes, Nick Fuentes, I believe. Is that correct? Nick?
Yeah,
First name
yeah.
Nick.
I believe so. Yeah, Nick Fuentes. Yeah.
Nick Fuentes, who I try desperately not to pay attention to because he's a little tiny troll who crawled out from under a bridge somewhere. And the minute, let's just say, Charlie Kirk's blood had not yet cooled when Nick Fuentes was weaseling his way in to be the new Charlie Kirk figure in the world. Problem with that is that Nick Fuentes is a white nationalist and an anti-Semite who praises Hitler and praises Stalin.
Wow.
And Tucker Carlson decided to have him on. There's no hope for Nick Fuentes. He is what he is. He makes no bones about it. But let me ask you this. If I came to you and said, Ant, we could get like 100 times the views on an episode if we invite Nick Fuentes on, what would be your reaction?
I didn't know anything about him until I just looked him up. But yeah, given all of that, I don't want to be anywhere near the guy.
That's right. It doesn't matter what good he can do for you, right? Because God help me, you have principles.
One doesn't only need principles. One can get away with the practicality of, let's say he's got 1 million followers. They're not followers you want.
Oh, he's got multiple millions of followers. And so does Tucker Carlson, tens of millions. I wouldn't go near the guy unless it was to slap him. He's a terrible human being. I have no problem saying this out loud. None whatsoever. He is the worst of the worst in that little space that he occupies. And Tucker Carlson decides to have him on. And they talk in public about things that just a generation ago, everybody would have been ashamed to say out loud. There was a reason Klansmen wore robes, right? You got to hide your face if you're going to say this kind of crap. And yet they just went on and on. But Ant, this isn't the bad part. The bad part is still coming, because once it happened, Kevin Roberts, is that a name you're familiar with?
No.
Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation. That's a pretty big post at the head of a pretty big operation. He came out and defended Tucker Carlson as a friend of the Heritage Foundation. And we'll always stand by our friends, said Kevin. The backlash, as you could imagine, was pretty quick. And he started backpedaling, not enough, but he started. And then there was a quick reorganization at Heritage. He's still the president as of this recording. I can't see a way that he remains president, but I can't see a way he said what he said. And I can't see a way that Tucker Carlson has Nick Fuentes on. And I can't see a way that Nick Fuentes believes what he believes. So who knows? Who knows? And it got me to thinking a lot these past few days. And you and I had a very brief chat about this a couple of days ago, before all this really bubbled up. But we're old enough to remember, you and I, that each of the parties had a real problem with the fringe elements that they attracted. Remember those days?
Oh, yeah.
When you looked at Democrats, and at the outer left fringe, there were avowed communists. And Democrats didn't quite know what to do with them, but knew that they wanted their votes, so they mostly kept quiet about it. And with the Republicans at their outer fringe, the John Birch Society and beyond, well, they had racists. And they didn't know what to say about that, but they wanted the votes, so they didn't say much. And I never for a second thought that mainstream Republicans were racist, and I never thought for a second that mainstream Democrats were communists.
Right. They had crazy uncles in their
midst,
which people have. Yeah.
And these were difficult things to deal with, and I think they had a bit of a gentleman's agreement that they were going to ignore each other's crazies for the most part until and unless the crazies got out of line and started saying a bunch of weird shit in public. But now it's starting to look for all the world like the crazy elements are the mainstream elements in the parties.
Yeah.
I don't think for a second that the crazy elements are the mainstream in the United States. And I think this explains why that independent number grows each year and the partisan faithful drop by a point here and a point there each year.
Yeah, and
I think people have washed their hands of this lunacy.
You have to go back over the past several decades and look at articles, look at opinion pieces to see this. But Sanders and AOC, who have become, I don't know if mainstream is the right word, but they're pretty close to it, mainstream Democrats. 20 years ago, AOC wasn't on the scene, but Sanders was a crazy person. He was the crazy uncle, right? And AOC, when she first appeared, was also. Right, exactly. Yeah, he hasn't gotten any less crazy, but it's just somehow they've taken over. And the sane Democrats are now a minority. They've become, if anything, the crazy uncle.
If you brought John F. Kennedy back from the dead, he would be a very conservative man at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he wasn't in 1960. But by today's standards, for the life of me, I can't figure out how the Democrats look to his image and say, that's our guy. We're like him. And the Republicans, God help me, do the exact same thing with Ronald Reagan, who would be unwelcome in today's Republican Party. He was by far the most popular president we have had, at least since Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah. If you go by the electoral vote,
by electoral,
he's second. Yeah, he is second only to George Washington.
And George Washington, let's just say, it was kind of fixed for him.
Right. Yeah.
That election was rigged. George Washington won the Electoral College at the time unanimously, because every human being in the United States knew that George Washington was going to be president. Hell, even John Adams knew it, and it bothered him until the end of his life. Where John Adams really wanted it. Being second president really didn't sit well with him. But everybody knew. Now Reagan shows up and wins a landslide victory in 1980 against Carter. And everybody said, oh, he's crazy. Nobody believed that, because 4 years later, he won an even bigger landslide. Walter Mondale in 1984 won his home state of Minnesota and Washington, D.C., and nothing else.
Yeah. It's the last time Americans have seen an electoral map that was all one color.
It was a no-doubter. And
Right.
Reagan had two of them. And as late as last week, we had a president of the United States misrepresenting what Ronald Reagan stood for almost completely. Reagan would not be welcome in today's Republican Party any more than I would be, or you, for that matter. So if you look at it, I honestly think we've gotten to the point where crackpots are in control of everything.
Yeah. Now, we talked about the Democrats, the communists basically becoming the mainstream, and the reasonable Democrats now the crazy uncle. But on the right, it's the extreme nationalists who have become the mainstream Republicans, and the reasonable Republicans are now the crazy uncle. And we're in this very weird space where the two major parties are each fringe groups.
That's right. And they're being led by the nose by a bunch of grifters who we all call influencers. They're not influencers, they're grifters. They look around and they say, how can I make the biggest splash I can make and get all the likes and clicks I can get that will make me really important so people will follow me and lots of money will fall from the sky into my lap? And you know what? That happens. that happens. The village idiots have finally found a way to unite, to find each other, to unite, and to become a powerful force. That's what social media has allowed. It's a lot of other really great things, but it has absolutely allowed this to happen. So you
We used to joke that the Kardashians were famous for being famous.
That's right.
That's now the thing now. I'm looking at Nick. I was looking up Nick Fuentes since you mentioned him. I don't see anything in his biography that would lead him to be in the position that he's currently in.
Well, no, he says things that other people find agreeable. He's got millions of village idiots following him. So all of a sudden, politicians take him seriously because he can deliver the votes of millions of village idiots. The morons are running the show. They have found each other. They have become self-aware. They have actualized, and they are many.
I disagree with that statement. And now, yes, they're running the show, but they're running the show because the reasonable people have seeded the field.
That's right.
I'm looking at numbers here of Americans by party. This is as of 2024. And Republicans, 28% of us identify as Republicans, 28% of us identify as Democrats. Basically a quarter and a quarter. Where's the other half of Americans? They're
in the middle, wondering what the hell's gone wrong.
Wondering what's going on, yeah. Now, you can break it down.
And problem is they don't find each other. They don't actualize. And how do I know this? We're in that group, and we don't have 5 million followers. Speaking the obvious truth in an easygoing way doesn't do anything if your primary goal is to become famous. That's not our primary goal. Never has been.
That's funny because it reminds me so much of the thing I often talk about when it comes to politicians. That if you give me two politicians, one whose primary goal is to serve the public and the other whose primary goal is to win elections, the second guy is the one who's going to win.
Every time.
And what you end up with is a government filled with people whose primary goal it is to be in government.
And they don't have the mental firepower to be there. We have a bunch of representatives right now who are so stupid, I wouldn't trust them to babysit my dog. And yet they're in Congress. We have a president who I am sure does not participate in reality the same way I do. Nobody thinks twice about it. The last president we had was demented. And nobody said a word. Why? Because having power to them was the important thing. And it didn't matter what they had to do or say to get it. So Joe Biden doesn't know what day it is or where he is. Well, just put him in his room. He'll be fine. We can get on with the business of governing the way we want to. We'll trot him out when he's lucid. Everybody now knows that's exactly what happened. And nobody gave enough of a damn at the time to raise their hand and say, this is unacceptable. We can't do this. The same way, nobody's putting up their hand right now saying anybody who puts Nick Fuentes in a position where he could reach more village idiots is not to be tolerated.
James and I are delighted to be working with Civil. For years, we have been pushing people to think about how we can make the world a better place. Civil's mission of upgrading society fits exactly with what James and I have been talking about for years. Civil helps us by allowing us to do what we do best, which is researching topics that are important and communicating those to our listeners in ways that we hope they find enjoyable. To see Civil's extensive list of content, including our podcast Words and Numbers and our new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live, visit civil.com. That's CIVL.com. Let me take you to something. You have mentioned a couple of times over the years that parties used to pick their candidates from smoke-filled rooms. And
I'm still in favor of it.
Each time you have said it, we've gotten a huge bump in listeners writing in saying, tell me more about this.
Yeah, that's right. It used to be the case that when I said it, people would call me terrible names. You're anti-democratic. Right. You don't want the people to have a say in their government. And I would say, you're right, but I don't like your tone, this sort of thing. And over the years, people have come around to say exactly what you just said. Tell me more about this. How can we do this? How can we get back to some semblance of normalcy? Because allowing the village idiots to make all the decisions gets you idiotic answers.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't look out your window and see that that's precisely what has happened, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. It's so obvious to me where the problems lie that I think it should be evident to everybody, just at first blush. The president of the Heritage Foundation couldn't find it in his heart to say there is no place for white nationalists and anti-Semites on the national stage. He said we shouldn't deplatform anybody. Bullshit. We should deplatform all kinds of people. Do you want Maoists coming on and say, well, we have to give Maoists a say? Okay, Maoists have to be allowed to say what they want, right? We have free speech. They have to be allowed to speak. That doesn't mean that they have to go on Tucker Carlson.
Okay, right. Yes. It's not a matter of them not having the right to say what they want to say. But it's Tucker's show. Tucker gets to say who's on there, and this is a stupid choice.
But Tucker said, oh, this is going to get me lots more clicks.
Right.
So Tucker's an idiot too.
Well,
and I would say, no, he's a destructive force. He should know better.
That's different than being an idiot. He has an objective, and he's pursuing it.
And long term, he's an idiot, because what will result is the destruction of civil society as we want it to be. That's the unintended consequence of behaving like this and becoming powerful enough. So, deplatforming. Everybody loves to talk about deplatforming, and I think it's kind of ridiculous when somebody who has a view slightly out of the mainstream to the left or the right isn't allowed to go to an event where he's been invited to offer that view, right? You think of somebody like Charles Murray, who wrote The Bell Curve. This is a perfectly reasonable human being who wrote a perfectly reasonable book that you might disagree with. And you might have reason to disagree with it. That's fine. If the college Republicans want to invite Charles Murray and he wants to come, what gives you the right to say, well, no, he shouldn't be allowed to come?
Mm-hmm.
But when somebody like Nick Fuentes, who praises Hitler and Stalin, wants to be more famous, every rational person should be standing in the way of that. Every rational person should look at that and say, oh, no. And this is the shit that happens when you call everybody you don't like a Nazi. When an actual Nazi shows up, what do you get to say?
How do you know? Yeah.
It's a shame on everybody. And this is, dare I say it, a problem that the left has bequeathed us, because the left decided to stymie things that they disagreed with, that they were going to make sure nobody could get in on the act. And if you doubt me, go look at every sociology department in the United States and give me a list of all the Republicans who work in them.
Right.
And don't stop there. Go to English and history and on and on and on and on. The left decided that 60s radicals were the only voice to be heard. And that's exactly what they got. And this is the backlash. And if people don't stop it, and I mean soon, this is going to end very badly.
And let's be clear, the problem isn't that there's something wrong with leftist thought. The problem is when all you have is one version, be it left or right. You got nobody to check your errors against, because everybody's just agreeing with you. And then you go off and you end up espousing stupid stuff.
They know deep in their hearts that they have no errors. You can't tell them anything, and they don't want to hear it. This is exactly what they wanted. They never thought that there would be a severe backlash to it like this. This is a backlash to that. It's the unintended consequence of taking over the realm of ideas. And now we all have to live with it. Thanks, leftists. Way to go.
Well, and fine, I don't disagree with you, but I'll throw out a warning to the people on the right. Don't think that when you do, and it will happen, that you gain back control of colleges and departments and whatnot, that all of a sudden now you can do what the leftists did. We'll end up right back where we started, just with a different set of stupid ideas.
And we think now in terms of purges. We have to take over and purge everybody else.
Right.
Get them.
Yes.
And as long as you keep thinking that way, that's exactly what you're going to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
The pendulum will keep swinging, so you won't accomplish it for long. And I'm going to throw out one of the most ridiculous things I've ever said. And I know I've said some ridiculous things over the years. Somebody who knows better has to step up and be the much bigger man. That's what's going to have to happen if this is ever going to end. We need, see, the founders, and it's a curiosity. If you read the literature of the American founding, and especially the Federalist, right, the 85 essays that comprise the Federalist, the word leader is never used except pejoratively. It's an insult. The only time it's ever used as a compliment is when they referred to the leaders of the American Revolution. But when they talk about political leaders, it's always an insult. What was the word that they used instead? Statesman. They called for statesmen and statesmanship, not leaders and leadership. So all these colleges that have departments of leadership, they're all barking up the wrong tree. And what are they producing? People who know that they are there to lead. To lead what? Nobody has any idea. What we need now is a statesman to emerge. Somebody who knows better and who can somehow capture the public imagination. And that's hard. Because look at what the public imagination glorifies now. We're probably in a death spiral.
I disagree. I know, I agree it looks like that, but let me quote you some numbers. This is from Gallup. What fraction of Americans identify as Republican, Independent, Democrat? In 1988, it was roughly one-third, one-third, one-third. And it's been slow, but it has been accelerating of late, that the two ends, people who identify as Republican and Democrat, have been dropping, while the middle, the fraction that identifies as independent, have been growing. So it's up since 1988 to now. The independents are up 10 percentage points, so roughly a third, from 30
quite a lot.
to 43%.
But here's the problem, and you know it as well as I do, and a number of people who we've had on as guests have pointed it out over the years. The two parties, no matter what slim minority they come to represent, make the rules of the game.
And that's the real problem, in my opinion. The system is fixed in favor of those two parties.
And they will not stop making the rules of the game.
Yep.
We're in a death spiral. Unless someone better, and I don't use that word lightly. I don't call one human being better than another human being, right? It's not my act. But somebody who is just substantively better, I mean, by a big, big margin. Unless people like that come along the way they came along at the time of the American founding.
Right.
When everywhere you looked, someone who knew better was in charge. How did people get to the Continental Congress? Well, let's go one better. How did they get to the Constitutional Convention? How was it that every single great mind in the United States, minus Thomas Jefferson, who was in Paris at the time, and minus Patrick Henry, who said he smelled a rat, and so he knew early on it wasn't going to work. How is it that every great mind in the country ended up in one room in Philadelphia? Because that's how things used to work. And when you got to make big decisions, make sure the best people you've got are in the room. And we don't do it that way at all anymore. If we did,
but
we wouldn't see the bullshit that we see day after day after day.
I can give you a clue as to how you can identify these people. They're the people who don't want the job.
Yeah, but they don't actually ever get the job. Look, I've made it clear, I don't want to be a politician. Therefore, I'm not and never will be. Why? Because it would cost me my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to lie all the time about everything to get reelected. Not doing it. I thought the other day, and I want you to do this thought experiment. I want you to think first about Republicans. What's the last national Republican? So think the House, the Senate, the presidency, vice presidency, if you like. This is the last national Republican that you could say, I respect him.
Probably Reagan.
Yep, that was my answer too. Now, let's do the Democrats. Harder, isn't it?
I have to make a distinction between respect and respect for the person and respect for the job he did.
Nope, don't do it. Don't say Jimmy Carter. No, don't do it. I mean respect for everything. All the way through.
Ford.
Ford was a Republican. Try again.
Oh, shoot. Of course he was. Truman.
Wow. Really? Dropping atomic bombs? No big deal?
That's a whole episode unto itself.
Yeah, it is. It's probably one we should have. For me, it's Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a gentleman and a legitimate scholar and an all-around good human being. I would love to have been able to have dinner with him just once. Reagan too. But both of these guys were active a very long time ago.
Yeah.
And Truman even longer. That's where we are. You can't think of a politician you respect. It's that hard. In a self-governing republic, we should have nothing but answers.
Right.
There should be lots of answers. They should come to the top of the mind immediately, and they don't. And if you don't think that's a problem, you're the problem. Because we, the people, allowed this to happen. It's our fault. That's how it works in a self-governing republic. And if your first reaction is to blame the other guy, whoever the other guy happens to be, now it's twice as much your fault. There are people out there, there are Democrats out there, and who think that no Republican thing that has ever happened has any merit. And there are Republicans who think that no Democratic thing that has ever happened has any merit. These people are legitimately crazy. They're loons.
We had gotten into the habit and then got out of the habit of closing our episode with a segment, and we've gotten out of the habit such I even forget what we called it, but it's basically
what should we do?
What should we do? And I think there's an obvious one here that people dismiss out of hand, but it is the answer. And that is, when election time comes around, get off the couch, go and vote for the third party.
Maybe.
Don't vote.
Maybe.
Vote, and don't vote for either of the major parties, because that's the only way we break that duopoly that the major parties have.
But you'll waste your vote, Ant.
No, see, and that's the thing.
That's
the thing. Everybody says that, and yet the plurality of Americans are independent.
I don't think that's the answer. I really don't. I think the answer has to be to demand better from the institutions we already have.
Yeah, but what does that mean practically?
I would say to not vote.
Oh, we're already doing that.
No, I mean nobody. Just don't do it. Stay home. Vote no. I talked, I think it was in our last episode. It might have been in the live stream that we did yesterday. It was in the live stream. See, we have the foundation of our government is consent. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to say when a people consents. Are the American people actively consenting to their government right now? And I say yes, because I don't see any evidence to the contrary, right? I don't walk out my door and see everything in disarray. I see people protesting, but that's actually relatively healthy. And when you protest, that's even a form of consent, right? Because what are you saying? You're saying, I like the system, but we have to make it better in this way. So, I mean, even protests can be, I think, legitimately seen as consent. If 8% of the American people voted in the next presidential election, consent is a thing of the past. And everybody knows it. Then you would see people start to panic.
Do you think all that would happen is whoever wins would say, I've got 51% of the vote. Doesn't matter how many voted.
Nobody walks around claiming a mandate because 8% of the people voted. Everybody knows at that point that everybody's on thin ice. And I think it's only in that sort of extreme condition that Washington will heal itself from within.
Let me offer a third alternative, because I just voted today, by the way, here in Virginia. And one of the things that disturbed me as I'm looking through the ballot, there's Republican for every position, a Republican candidate, a Democratic candidate. There's no third-party candidate. Okay, fine. But I found myself wanting a none of the above.
Yep, me too.
Why can we not require that be an option?
If we did that nationally, you would get a different snapshot of the electorate immediately.
Yes.
I would love to see that at the federal level, right, for the presidency. And I would like to see that for Congress, for the House and the Senate as well. That would change things instantly.
Yeah, that satisfies both of our prescriptions.
It does.
You can stay home and there's one less vote being cast, or you can go and vote and you vote for none of the above. And you have actively said, I'm not happy.
I would like to vote no in a lot of elections. Not all. I'm happy to admit not all. Every now and then a candidate passes my field of vision and I think, that person's not terrible. Let's try this. But how often that happens, it's negligible. We're in a death spiral. I believe it's my core. Now, I don't think the American people are in a death spiral. I think very highly of the American people. I used to think very highly of the American system, but the American system has been hijacked by the village idiots, and there's no way to get it back. Not easily. So this is how we're going to live now. We'll keep calling it out when we see it, and it won't make any difference. And we will never have the following that Nick Fuentes has or Tucker Carlson. But, this is part of the death of expertise. We spent our entire lives studying these things, and we know what the hell we're talking about. If you want to listen to people who know what the hell we're talking about, it's us. It's not Nick Fuentes. But the people have spoken. That's what they want. Okay. I guess they should get it good and hard.
At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and government, but fundamentally, all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect. That people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner is at the core of our problem. We at Civil are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at civil.com. That's CIVL.com.